Hello, this is Bill Bullard with R-CALF USA, the voice of the independent cattle producer in the United States of America. Well, if we only learned one thing so far in 2020, it's that if we want to preserve for future generations the American cattle rancher as we know him or her today, we don't have much time. The 2020 marketplace was brutal for America's cattle producers, and there were several firsts in 2020. For the first time in my lifetime, at least two of the big four packers voluntarily paid cattle producers as much as $5 a hundredweight more for the cattle that the packers had already purchased from those very producers in the marketplace. For the first time in my lifetime, consumers went to their local grocery stores and couldn't buy the beef they needed for their families. And for the first time in my lifetime, American cattle producers had cattle ready to sell, but they couldn't get a bid for their cattle for as long as 7 weeks. And for the first time in my lifetime, the federal government gave price support subsidies to cattle producers while consumers were paying all-time record prices for beef, while beef demand was high, and while exports remained strong. And for the first time in my lifetime, government officials at all levels, from state agricultural directors to state attorneys general to members of both houses of Congress, and even the President of the United States, have called attention to the weaknesses in the cattle industry by calling for formal investigations. These firsts are not blue ribbons to be proud of. Instead, these firsts are powerful signals that there is something terribly wrong within America's single largest segment of American agriculture, and that's the United States cattle industry. Now, in recent presentations made to cattle producers across the country, R-CALF USA cited 7 indices of the systemically broken cattle industry. We provided charts showing a long-term downward trajectory in 1, the number of cattle producers, 2, the size of the U.S. cattle herd, 3, the number of feedlots, 4, feedlot profitability, 5, cow-calf producer profitability, 6, the share of the consumer's beef dollar received by producers, and 7, the price of cattle in relationship to the price that consumers continue to pay for beef. Now, these indices, each marked by a negative downward trajectory, do not depict a strong, vibrant industry capable of strengthening America's ailing rural economy. Instead, these are industries of an entire industry in crisis. And perhaps the most revealing evidence of this crisis is the cattle producers' ever-shrinking share of the consumer's beef dollar. This shrinkage suggests that competitive market forces are no longer capable of properly allocating beef profits to everyone along the domestic beef supply chain. Now, just 3 decades ago, the competitive marketplace allocated about 60 cents of every dollar spent on beef back to the live cattle supply chain. In 2020, it dropped nearly to half of that. So why is the marketplace no longer allocating the competitive share of the consumer's beef dollar that used to flow to America's cattle farmers and ranchers? And the answer is because what has long been a chronically dysfunctional marketplace is now an acutely dysfunctional marketplace. That means the once competitive cattle industry, in which producers earned a competitive income from a competitive marketplace, no longer exists. Today, America's cattle farmers and ranchers are relegated to selling cattle into a dysfunctional, non-competitive marketplace. And that can't last. And that's why I said at the beginning, we don't have much time if we want to preserve for future generations America's cattle industry as we know it today. So what must we do? Well, first and foremost, we must restore our industry's lost competition for beef and for cattle. For better or worse, Congress must do this for us because our industry's remaining independent cattle producers have no means to change the market structure of our industry as it must be changed. Congress must restore competition for beef by passing a new law requiring all beef sold in America to be labeled as to where it was born, raised, and harvested. And Congress must restore competition for cattle by passing a new law requiring packers to purchase at least 50% of their cattle in the competitive cash market. Now, a bill has already been introduced to do this. It's Senate Bill 3693. It's the Grassley-Tester bill, and we need it passed as quickly as possible. More than anything else, these two measures will effectively begin to restore the lost competition in our industry and help to preserve America's cattle farming and ranching operations for future generations. I hope you'll pick up your phone and call your senators and representatives to tell them these are the two things they must do to reverse rural America's downturn. With that, we hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving. And if you'd like more information and wish to join with us, please go to www.r-calfusa.com. Thank you and have a productive week.